Hey, Mark, thank you so much for joining us at the podcast, The X Monks Drive. How have you been today?
Thank you very much, Gaurav, for having me. It's great to be on your show. And I've been doing very well, to be honest. I hope you're doing well as well.
Absolutely, God's been very kind. It's always a pleasure talking to you, but let me ask you a simple question. Am I talking to a hologram, an avatar, or it's a real deal?
You're talking to the real deal here,
Fantastic.
Gaurav.
Because every time I've spoken to you, at times I get confused. Am I talking to the real Mark or
Yes,
somebody
no,
has
it's
replaced Mark
the
already?
real deal. Whether my background is real or not, that's up for you to decide.
I know. Um, Mark, the kind of shift that I have observed in the way you show up on screen, I've not come across anyone. And you know that I've been following you up for almost 2 years now. You call yourself digital speaker. And while preparing for all that, I have a very basic question for you. What is digitization when the world is talking about that?
Sure. Well, it's a very good question. So, at the moment, the world is changing faster than ever before. And
Mm,
what I always tell people is, that we live in exponential times. This change that's happening is growing at such an enormous pace. And that is partially due to the convergence of the various technologies that we have, various
mm,
digital technologies, artificial intelligence, big data analytics, blockchain, and recently the metaverse.
mm,
And what you see happening is that these technologies require us that we move from an analog species to a digital species, Homo digitalis. You can always call it, where whatever we do is linked to the digital component of it, to
mm,
a digital world. So ones and zeros, bits and bytes, and um, uh, the digital speaker is also from that perspective. I've been doing keynotes for years, and when the pandemic hit, I couldn't fly anymore. So I decided, why don't I practice what I preach? Why don't I digitalize myself so that I become
mm,
available in digital format and digital shape? And instead of doing digital, I can be digital. And the moment
mm,
you are digital, then all of a sudden new opportunities arise. Now I can deliver keynotes as my hologram, as my avatar. I can do the multiple languages. I can be at multiple locations at the same time. All
mm,
kinds of things that I couldn't do before. And of course, what applies for me as a keynote speaker to do these kind of things applies to any organization or any government to do the
mm,
same thing. If we move from doing digital to being digital in all our fabric of our organization, of all in the fabric of our society, we create a completely new world, a new perspective, new paradigm shift. It
mm.
is a paradigm shift, I have to say. And once we have that, then all of a sudden new things become possible, and the world of abundance lies there. So being digital, having a digital presence is absolutely key, I think, in today's world.
I just love it when you said it's not about doing digital, it's about being digital. And in order to have that happen, there's abundance which is waiting on the other side. But what is required is the paradigm shift. Just curious, when you're talking about the paradigm shift, what does that mean? What kind of paradigm shift is required to make that being digital happen?
So the way I always look at that is what we need to achieve is a gestalt shift. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the famous image, which is a duck and a rabbit at the same time. And you either
Yeah,
see a duck or you see a rabbit, but you cannot see them both at once. And that
yeah,
shift is called the gestalt shift,
yeah.
where you see something from a different perspective. And there are
Mm,
countless other examples available on the internet, but this is the most well known. And what you want to achieve as an organization is that we move to a data organization,
mm,
where an organization that's not a product company, but that's a data company that happens to that serves a particular objective, and that makes happens to make a certain product. For example,
mm,
you can be a car company that is a product company and makes cars, or you can be a company that helps people move from A to B and happens to make cars. It's a different perspective,
Yeah.
but once you have this different perspective, then all of a sudden a whole new world opens up, because you can make self-driving cars, you can make I don't know, self-driving steps, you can make bicycles, you can whatever you can think of. You can make apps to help people move better from A to B. You become this data-driven organization, and data
Beautiful.
organizations are part of a data network, which is the industry that the organization is part of. And having that perspective change, I think that is crucial, because all of a sudden, then you see what else is possible. And let me give you an example here, because this is one example that I love to use, because it's still an amazing example. Is a German company, very traditional German company, Käse Compressors. You probably won't have heard of it. They make these big ventilation machines for factories, really big machines. A very traditional German company that sold these machines for a lot of money. They would implement it. They would you would buy it. They would install it. If it breaks down, you call them up. They come by and they fix it. Very traditional approach. They decided, okay, we need to have a different perspective. So now, if you want to have one of those machines, they come and deliver it for free. They install it for free. They use analytics to ensure predictive maintenance, so that whenever it's about to break down, they fix it before it breaks down, so you never have a broken down machine, so you always have fresh air. And they basically, or literally, they sell air as a service. I love it. This is a company that makes tons of money selling air, literally, which I think is fantastic, because they have this completely different mindset, a different perspective, that we have these big machines and we can sell them for a ton of money and install them, or we can install them for free and just sell per cubic meters of air consumed. And then we have an objective as a company to ensure that machine always works. Because if that machine always works, we get paid and the customer is happy. Because having this different perspective, what is very important is that you also have the customer mindset. You need to have this customer-centric perspective. Because if you do that, then the customer is happy, and therefore your shareholders are happy, and your employees are happy. So that's the different perspective. Wow. That's the data organization that I'm talking about.
Wow. What a shift, because, from the two examples that you have mentioned about, the first is the car manufacturing company. The second one is a product manufacturing company that happens to produce air. The shift is where product becomes a vehicle to deliver on a promise. Rather than getting stuck with the product that we manufacture, cars happen to become a vehicle to deliver on the promise to help people move from one place to another.
Right.
Just curious, Mark, can this be applied in any industry? So for example, when we are in the industry of, let's say, food or hospitality, or for that matter, leadership development, coaching, legal services.
I would argue yes. And for some industries, you need to look a bit further and search a bit harder. But I'm convinced that for any industry, you can apply this. Having this data perspective at your organization, looking at it from a different angle, where you can deliver a particular product that offers value to your customer and offers value to your shareholders and your employees.
Okay. Let's take one step forward, Mark. The world is, of course, talking about AI. We are talking about big data. We are talking about blockchain. We are talking about Meta. And suddenly this brand shift from Facebook to Meta has created a lot of buzz in the world. What is this Metaverse?
That's a very good question.
And this is like a 3-year-old or a third grade student asking the PhD professor in Harvard. Tell me, what does it mean? So
it's for me, it's very simple. The metaverse is the next iteration of the internet, and the metaverse is where the physical and the digital worlds are converging, and where the physical moves into the digital and the digital moves into the physical. And once that happens, we get this so-called phygital experience, which is not the most beautiful word, but it really explains sort of what it is. It's
physical plus digital.
Yeah, is equals phygital. So what this means is we have this convergence of the digital and the physical world. And so we can see that as you have a virtual reality headset, where we bring the physical world into the digital world. So this can be that we meet in a 3D form in virtual reality instead of having this 2D conversation that we have now. It can be that we have digital twins, which are basically digital replicas of physical products using sensors that collect data. And then once we have that data, we can interact with that physical device using, for example, virtual reality or augmented reality. So we bring the physical into the digital. We have this immersive experience using virtual reality. That's one part. The other part is we bring the digital into the physical world, which is predominantly done using augmented reality. So we add an additional layer or a lens on the physical world. And this layer can be anything. It can be entertainment, it can be art, it can be operational information that's required to manage something. You can almost have endless layers on top of reality that does something else based on the data that you use. And when we talk about the metaverse, a lot of people at the moment think that virtual reality equals metaverse, and that's absolutely not the case.
Let me just add one more sentence, and that will only solidify why most of us believe metaverse is equal to VR or AR. Because somewhere I read metaverse is about simulating the physical world inside the digital world, which can then be experienced using VR and AR to optimize the physical world. Now, the very fact that we have this term called VR and AR in between, and that's where most of us get confused, that metaverse is equal to any digital environment that has been created, and we can access that using VR and AR machines.
Well, yes and yeah. So the way I look at it is that VR and AR are just channels to enter the metaverse. A computer is also a way to enter the metaverse, because we have these worlds, Roblox and Decentraland and the Sandbox, which a lot of people think is part of the metaverse. You access them using your computer, or you access them using your phone, but we also see that as the metaverse. So it's just a way to step into the metaverse, whether it's your smartphone, your tablet, your desktop computer, your VR headset, or your AR glasses, or your AR lenses in the future. And they offer you, whichever channel you use, they offer you a different experience. We are moving to so the metaverse is not either or. It's not VR only or AR only. It's the whole. It's more than that. The metaverse is where the physical and the digital meet. That's where the metaverse lives, and that's where you have an endless blue ocean that could deliver trillions of dollars for the social economy.
Let's look at that. When we are talking about metaverse, we are talking about Web 3.0. My challenge with Web 2.0 is still that we are not being able, at least I am not being able to experience and trigger the emotion that I've been able in the physical realm. When I go and when I hug people, there's something that happens to me. When I go and shake hands, there's something that happens to me. With every extension of Web 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0, I believe we are creating distance in the physical realm. What's your take on that? What's going to happen to the emotions, to the feelings, that human to human connections?
Well, before I answer that question, I first have to correct something, which is that the metaverse does not equal Web3. We don't need Web3 to build the metaverse.
Okay.
We can build the metaverse perfectly fine with Web2 technologies. Whether we want that, that's a different story. I think we shouldn't want that, because then we end up in a worst situation that we have today, where a few people own and control the web, and therefore they own and control us. So that's not something what we would want. We can use Web3, which is infrastructure, and we build the metaverse on top of that infrastructure. So they're not the same. They're different things.
So when I'm using the word Web 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, it's primarily we are referring to the infrastructure. And when we are talking about metaverse, That's the technology that could be built onto that infrastructure. Is my understanding right?
That's how I look at it. Yeah, correct.
Super. Thank you.
And so we have this opportunity to build a metaverse using Web3 technologies,
Hmm.
but there's no given that this will happen. But in my opinion, the way I look at it, and also why I wrote my fourth book, which is called Step into the Metaverse, which is sort of a blueprint for how to create an open metaverse, how to create a metaverse where we own our data, we own our identity, where we own our digital assets, instead of Facebook or Google or Tencent or whichever company you have in mind owning our data and identity. And
Makes sense.
so, but linked to that, what is also not possible, what I also read a lot online, is that people say that the metaverse will be purely decentralized, should be purely decentralized. And well, that is certainly to the extent that is true, that we should strive for a metaverse that is completely decentralized for the next 1 or 2 decades. That is simply not possible, because yes, we can use Web3 technology such as blockchain technology to make sure that we have self-sovereignty of identity and reputation, that we own our data and that we own our assets. But streaming hyper-realistic volumetric data over decentralized protocols is not possible, because we can barely make that happen with centralized technology, let alone in decentralized technology. So what we need to have is some kind of a hybrid version where we have centralized components, centralized technologies to stream all this hyper-realistic volumetric data, linked with Web3 technologies, so that we own the NFTs, so that we own our assets using NFTs, so that we own our data, so that we own our identity, because that will drive the most value. Now, to answer your original question, how can we bring emotion to this? I think in the years to come, when the technology will improve and we'll have hyper-realistic virtual and augmented experiences, that will by itself be create emotions, because it will enable us to, first of all, it will remove the barriers between a physical and a digital experience, because we can be in the same room and you be in the physical room, and I can appear as my hyper-realistic avatar in virtual reality, and for both of us it would look and feel as if we are in the same physical room. That's where we're going. That's still a decade away at least, but that's where we're going. And once you have that, I think then that will allow us for more emotions, just like the phone and the smartphone allowed us for having real emotion, real connection with our relatives, with our friends and family on the other side of the world. I live in Australia. My family lives in Europe, and I have conversations with them over the phone, over FaceTime, which is just real connections where full emotions. And the same thing will happen with I can't feel them, but I can feel them emotionally, which is the same thing to a certain extent. So from that perspective, I think the metaverse will be able to bring that human connection. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we should just forgo about the physical world and physical contact and physical interactions and meeting up with your friends and family over a drink. Of course, that we should also do. But I think in the end, the metaverse will help also drive this human emotion.
As I'm just listening to you, what I'm also realizing is that on one hand, it could be a blessing. On one hand, it could be a boon. On the other hand, it could be a bane as well, right? As a technology could be used to create nuclear weapons, or it could be used to create life-saving medicines and equipments. Now, considering that, as I'm just listening to you, I'm experiencing some kind of fear. I'm finding it extremely dangerous, because on one hand, I could be available sitting with my sister in Australia, in Melbourne. On the other hand, I could be delivering a session in the US Bay Area. So what's your take on this?
Just like the current internet, the metaverse is not without dangers. There are certain dangers lurking in the corners of the metaverse, 100%. And every problem that we have, every harassment, every polarization, every misinformation, every hacking, every attack, everything that exists in the virtual world of today will extrapolate in the metaverse. So
And
um,
to a different degree altogether.
Oh yeah, for sure. Let's take an example. Deep fakes. Today we have deep fakes, and we have a variety of deep fakes, which are
Hmm.
problematic, but so far not really harmful. Fortunately, we have seen Zelensky that had a deep fake, which was really badly done. Fortunately, we have seen the funny deep fakes with Obama and Queen Elizabeth. But they are pretty harmless because it's still quite difficult to change a physical video
Hmm.
and to adjust that. Now, in the metaverse, when we have hyper realistic digital persons, and I'm
Hmm.
building a digital human, a digital copy of myself, an exact digital replica of myself.
Hmm.
If I can do that of me, then you, Gaurav, can do that also of me, because all you need is some photos and some video, and you go
Yeah,
to work.
absolutely.
You now have my voice, and you can clone my voice, and then you can be me in the metaverse. And there's nothing that I can do to stop that. And there's nothing
Oof.
that I can, unless we link that then to NFTs. But then you can hack my computer to hack my wallet so that you have the NFT that is linked to me. So then you need to link it to my biometrics so that I'm sure that this avatar that looks like me, that sounds like me, is actually controlled by me. And for if this would happen to me, that would be annoying. That would be really annoying. But if this would happen to President Biden, for example, or Zelensky, we have a bigger problem. Or to the
Absolutely.
CEO of a big company who says something, that's very, very problematic. And I hear very few people thinking about this because this is going to happen,
Oops.
guaranteed. And you think that deepfakes today are problematic? Wait till we see the deepfakes of tomorrow, which are 100 times more problematic. And because just to stress my point, I can recommend going on YouTube and looking at the promotional video, "The Matrix Awakens." That's been created by Warner Bros. And Epic Games, promote the last Matrix movie at the end of 2021, and it's a 10-minute video slash game that you can play on your PS5 and your latest Xbox. And this entire video, what you see, is made digitally. So you have Keanu Reeves, who appears in that video, but he doesn't exist. He is made digitally. And the moment you look at that and you hear and you listen to what I've just said to you, then it should really scare you of what is possible. Now, I don't want to sound the really negative, but I do think that we should pay attention to this and we should focus on how to prevent this from happening, because this will happen.
Yeah. Even when we are talking about the NFTs, the non-fungible tokens, even if you have the record, even if you have the key for that, I can definitely create a replica of Mark, which is not exactly the same. I'll just add another Mark here. So Mark has a Mark here, but that would be a very different NFT. But you never know, I can definitely use that and misuse that.
Well,
It is
and a
definitely
lot of
scary.
And a lot of people are gullible. If something sounds like a person that you know, looks like a person that you know, you're very eager to believe that that is the person who you know. And
Yes.
this is already happening today on the web, where we see Elon Musk giving away free Bitcoin, which of course is nonsense. But that people still fall for that. Let's have a digital replica of Elon Musk that looks like Elon Musk, sounds like Elon Musk, moves like Elon Musk, and therefore a lot of people will think it is Elon Musk. And then Elon Musk can say whatever he wants to, whatever the criminal behind Elon Musk wants to say, and then how do we go about that?
So, Mark, on one hand, what I'm listening is I'm sure it has its blessings, but right now I can hear more of a bane because it could be a disaster for the humanity. So, I've got two questions here. What do you think? How should we approach this? And the second question is, how is it going to add value to the normal human beings who are still struggling to make the two ends meet?
So I think so. With as you mentioned before, technology is neutral, and we can use technology for good, and we can use technology for bad. The metaverse, the immersive internet, the next generation of the internet, however you want to call it, is not going away. It is going to happen, whether we want it or not. We do have a blank canvas now to build something in a way that we know what's coming, so we can build something that at least adheres to our values, that we can limit the problems. And I describe a lot of these problems, but I describe also some of the solutions to these problems in my book. How we can solve this, how we can prevent this from happening. That it will happen, that's a guarantee. The question is, how are you going to structure the metaverse so that we create a metaverse that's nice for us, that's easy to live in, and that offers up an experience in a way that is beneficial to society.
So yeah, what's your take? How can we actually prevent this to happen? How can we structure the metaverse that it is used for the benefit of humanity?
Well, I think what we need three things. We need verification, we need education, and we need regulation. Verification in terms of that we need to have a self-sovereign identity, but we need to be sure that there's also a person behind that avatar that we're talking to, and that person is indeed the person who I think he or she is. And we can do that using a self-sovereign identity, using self-sovereign reputation, where we build reputation over time, and a concept which I call anonymous accountability, which I also describe in the book. We can then be more certain that this person is who he or she says he or she is, and we can trust in dealing with this person. That's one part. The second part is education. So we need to educate people. We need to educate the non-metaverse natives, which is basically everyone except Generation Z and Generation Alpha, to understand how the metaverse works. But we also need to understand, we need to also require large corporations to make sure that their terms and conditions, which are generally unreadable, becomes readable in a way that they are accessible to anyone using an infographics, for example. And that's linked to regulation, where governments need to require big tech to do that, so that at least we know what's happening. In addition, in terms of regulation, for example, what you also see happening a lot at the moment is harassment already in the metaverse. Women being sexually harassed in the virtual world. That's terrible, especially if you think that to our brain, if the virtual reality is done in such a way with everything in sync, to your brain, whatever happens in that virtual world happens actually in the physical world. So if you're digitally sexually harassed, that feels to that woman as if she is physically sexually harassed. And this happens today. And on a large scale. And I think this is really problematic, obviously. But the interesting thing is we can have regulation, we can have data controls to stop that from happening. Very simple. Because it's data, I can prevent someone to come close to me within certain feet, or to do certain groping movements with their avatar. I can just prevent that from happening. And if then somebody still does it, I can ban that person automatically for a minute. And if that person does it again, I ban him for 2 minutes, and then for 5 minutes, then for an hour, and until somebody learns his lesson that we don't want to do this. There are definitely ways around creating a metaverse that's more pleasant to work in. Because if we don't think about these things today, I do think we end up in a metaverse that's not necessarily a pleasant environment.
Yeah. As I'm just listening to you, what I'm contemplating on, as you said, that in case we don't think of this right now, we are going to get into a very sorry state. And it's bound to happen. It's scary for sure, because right now people are getting into that because of the promising opportunities which are available in front of us. And one thing is for sure, that as much as we can bring in technology, we cannot bring in consciousness in that avatar or hologram. But I'm sure we can have the consciousness in the people who are creating that. So as you're talking about the structure, you're talking the verification or the accountability, I think we need to have more consciousness technologists, people who have got more consciousness, right? People who are more who have a heart to add more value to the humanity to get into that space. How can we do that?
That's very difficult because in the end, we are a capitalist species, and we see this $1 trillion opportunity that the metaverse also is, and we go to we run after that because it and then sometimes we forget to think a little bit harder, and unfortunately, Mr. Zuckerberg, he was really of the paradigm of what is it, run fast and break things, which I think we should go slow and think first, and because if we were to think a bit harder when we build these kind of things, we can prevent a lot of problems from happening. Interesting example, like yesterday or the day before, there was this NFT launch. I forgot the name, and they, despite several warnings, their smart contract was not correct. As a result, the $34 million that they raised got locked into the smart contracts and is gone forever. If they had just thought about a little bit longer and audited their code and took a little bit more time instead of rushing ahead, then they could have prevented this from happening. So let's go a little bit slower and think of a little bit longer before we start to build things.
Yeah, because as I'm just listening to you, I'm realizing it's a very cannibalistic act we are getting into. We are feeding a beast that sometime in the future might eat us.
Yeah, that could be. The metaverse obviously comes from Snow Crash, by Neil Stephenson in 1992. And it was portrayed as a very dystopian future, very dystopian. We all living in a virtual world, and because the physical world is such a horrible place, and we all controlled by the company behind, as in Ready Player One, company behind who owns the virtual world, what does that mean then to be human? What I think that the metaverse will certainly change what it means to be human, I would like to have it. I'm a positive person. I generally look at the world through a positive lens, but I am also a realist, where I see that humans might have the best intentions, but they might forget things. They might not look at the right approach, and then we end up still in the wrong place.
Yeah. And let me just make a statement here, which is again, I think, coming from a little darker space, and then we'll move to what could be the possible benefits. How could this be a boon to the humanity? So what I'm listening is, on one hand, we are moving away from the current existing digital world because there are a few companies that hold the digital space. So in order to let go of that, so in order to protect our freedom, we are getting into meta space without realizing we are getting into slavery for a longer time, right? Let's look at on the other side. What does it mean to the normal human beings who, as I mentioned, who are still struggling to make ends meet?
Well, from that perspective, it can have a lot of benefits. We see a lot of new business models, for example, in the metaverse. One which caught a lot of attention in the past year is play to earn, where you can play a game and earn money with that. And in some instances, people were able to earn more money by playing that game than having a laborer's job, which I think is very interesting. And it's definitely not that that we've solved that issue, because there are a lot of problems with this as well. A lot of the news was very much Axie Infinity, where a lot of people in the Philippines were playing that and then would quit their jobs because they could earn more money by raising monsters in the game Axie Infinity than to have a real job. Which now, with the hype being a bit less, that opportunity is also less, and the first who entered the market made the most money. So it is sort of a pyramid scheme. So we do have to think carefully about that. But the fact that we've moved into this direction of where we can have play to earn, or we can have stream to earn, or read to earn, or listen to earn, or whatever XYZ to earn, I think that is really interesting. And we haven't cracked this how this would work completely, but there is something there that we can have a different approach. And I think that could be beneficial for the creators. It can be beneficial for the consumers. It can be beneficial for everyone in society if we make this in the right way. And then that also could open up new opportunities for people to earn to contribute value in novel ways. And what I think is really important, what we need to achieve is that we need to move from a society focused on value extraction, which is the current web. We use data, and the data is being used to extract value from us, and that value is going to a small, tiny elite of big tech and shareholders. We need to move to a system of value creation, where we create value by spending our time, whether we're playing a game, or whether we're building something or creating something. We create value, and that value is beneficial to us and to society. So moving away from value extraction to value creation is, I think, the main opportunity for the metaverse.
Yeah. Mark, also help me understand, since we are talking about metaverse, we are talking about holograms, we are talking about digital avatar of Mark or Gaurav. Does it mean that I could be present in more than one place at the same time?
Technically, you could. You could project your hologram on multiple locations at the same time, and then be live at multiple locations at the same time. Obviously, you can also have recordings, and then have your recordings play at multiple locations. So yeah, that's definitely possible.
So on one hand, what I'm listening is this could definitely be a blessing when it comes to service business. But all the other businesses where you need to do things, manufacturing, construction, how could metaverse be a blessing in those industries?
Well, for example, it could make manufacturing or operating a factory or constructing something or fixing something a lot easier and faster, because I can have AR lenses or AR glasses, and when I'm building a car or I'm fixing a machine, I get a digital overlay of what I need to do. So instead of reading manual, I just put on my AR glass and I see exactly, cut this wire, connect that wire, and twist this one and do that, just in front of me. So that would make that easy. You see it also already happening. VR is already being used for training and education. If you have a hyper-realistic digital replica of a very difficult heart operation, where you then can stop it and you can look at it and you can look at it from different angles, that would allow surgeons to have a much better experience. So there are tons of possibilities here.
Wow. I can understand that. I know what you're saying, and somehow I'm not been able to get it. I'm not been able to experience it. I know you would have heard this statement from many people several times. Now, Mark, help me understand. Let's take one step ahead. What do you think? What are the myths that you would have heard people talking about metaverse that you would like to clarify? Any 2 or 3 myths?
Well, I think the most important one I've already clarified. I think the metaverse is more than just VR or more than just AR. It's a combination of them. The metaverse does not equal Web3. We built the metaverse on top of Web3 if we are smart. I think those are the main ones. And maybe the metaverse is not without dangers, because the metaverse has a lot of dangers.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing that. On one hand, technologically, we are growing at a very, very fast pace. And unless we start to grow consciously as individuals, I think we are moving towards destruction. So what is really important is that on one hand, we should continue to develop ourselves technologically. At the same time, we need to raise our consciousness as well, so that we can create a world where people can live together with peace, humanity, care, forgiveness. And even if I might be creating some kind of mess digitally, people should be willing to forgive me. So thank you so much, Mark. Mark, anything that you would like to share with our audience? And I'm sure as we continue, would love to have you on this podcast again. to talk about blockchain, to talk about Web 3.0, to talk about data science, to talk about different technologies that you are doing a lot of research in for almost like a decade now. And I don't know anyone else who has the kind of grip and the kind of authority that you have in this domain. So anything that you would like to share?
I would just finish off with, it's going to be a wild ride, the metaverse. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. It's going to be challenging. There's a famous quote from Arthur C. Clarke. Any technology good enough is close to magic. I'm not saying it correctly, but that's the idea. And the metaverse will bring this magic. So it's something to look forward to, but it's also something to look forward to in the right way. And that's, if I may plug, that's why I wrote my book, Step into the Metaverse, to create this blueprint for an open metaverse. How can we create a metaverse that's beneficial, not just to big tech and a tiny elite, but that's beneficial to the entire society in ways that has never done before. If you're interested in this, Step into the Metaverse, available end of May.
Super. I'm so looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Mark. And this is the time to bring Web 3.0, to bring in metaverse on one side and bring in consciousness on the other side to further raise humanity. Thank you so much, Mark. Have a wonderful day ahead, and I look forward to see you soon.
Thank you very much, Gaurav. It was a pleasure being with you.